Well, hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software, and I am pleased to present today Sarah Mitchell, who's in charge of our documentation. Now, I think we told some of you we weren't going to do a webcast this week, so this is a surprise. We didn't tell you about it webcast, and I'm glad to see actually quite a few people showed up. Dion is on vacation this week. He will be back next week, but Sarah has got some really cool stuff to show you. So let's get started. Also, just to let you know, we're here to answer your questions as well. That makes it the Q&A webcast, not just the demo. So you can type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. All right, Sarah, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can, and I can see your screen. Excellent. So let's get started.
Welcome. All right. So last week, Chris, Martin, and I totally did tell you guys that we were definitely canceling this week, and I'm back again to do another demo for you because I realized on Friday I wanted to do this again. So welcome to a surprise, not canceled, totally scheduled webinar. And I wanted to talk about two things today. First, a question we got last time about sending notifications to a smartphone lock screen based on updates in a database. How do you do that? How do you send a notification when data in your database changes? And I just wanted to answer that briefly, and I'm going to talk to Dion about doing an actual demo for you guys because unfortunately I didn't have time to set up an example of how this works like in real time. But I did figure out what you need to do. And what you have to do is you have to set up push notifications, which can be triggered by running a scheduled task or a database trigger that then executes a web page that calls the service. So you need multiple things to do this. One, you need a push notification service such as PushWish, which we have integrated into Alpha Anywhere for mobile applications. But some services also provide a REST API, which you can call into to trigger those exact same notifications to the mobile device. In addition to that, you need the code to execute that call somewhere, either in an A5W page, or even if you wanted to use a different, something like maybe the A5W page doesn't actually execute the trigger that calls, that sends the notification, but maybe it calls into another service that has that same trigger, such as like it's called if this then that. IFTTT is this type of service, but Zapier has a lot of integrations that do things like if you've got a SQL Server database, it can then be triggered to call and push that notification out. So if you're not using that type of service, you can certainly do this approach where you have a database trigger in your database that calls that page, or a scheduled task that just runs in the Windows task scheduler periodically, which could call a batch file that executes a curl command to open up your A5W page. And for those of you who are curious about our notification services stuff, that is in documentation. This is specifically for a phone app. And I will paste that in the chat window for you. But we've integrated into PushWish, and we do have a template that shows how to do that. In addition to that, there is Apple push notification services, directly cloud messaging. Windows has it. The cross-platform services out there are PushWish, which we've integrated with, but also like Google Cloud Messaging or Microsoft Azure Notification Hub. These are all available to you, and they all offer standard APIs that you can call. So I believe in order to receive the notification on the device, you have to have the application installed. Is that correct, Dave?
Yes, you need to have it. Pretty sure, yeah, you need to have the application installed so it has some place to push to. But
right.
Again, we should do a full demo because that would be very cool.
We should definitely do a demo of this. But I wanted to give that person who asked this question last week sort of like a little bit of a teaser answer, so they could start looking into it. Because waiting until we get to this next week, maybe, it's a couple weeks. So, but as for the rest of today, I just want to talk to you guys more about subtheming and really dig into that window theme that we were working on, and also show you where you can go to get everything that we do today in GitHub. So without further ado, I'm just going to go to the live demo. And today, the live demo is going to start at GitHub. So if you don't know this, we have an Alpha Anywhere GitHub account at github.com/alphaanywhere that has a number of sample applications in it that you are free to clone, download, fork, whatever, change them to your heart's content, use them for whatever you want to use them for. And we have a repository up there called Styling Applications, which is where I have put the stuff we worked on last week in. And to start today, we're actually going to clone this into a new project, a new workspace in Alpha Anywhere, and I'm going to show you how that all works. So Alpha Anywhere now has integrated with Git, including the ability to clone stuff from GitHub. So I'm going to make a new workspace. August 7 demo. August 7th? August 7 demo. All right. Create a new workspace. I'm going to open the web projects control panel. And I want to convert this into a Git repository. So we have this option up here. It's a little red diamond. And then when you click on it, if you haven't converted it to a Git repository, you get this option, the Git menu dialog. You can convert this directly into a Git repository locally, so everything is stored in source control. You can commit things, roll back things. It's all local right on your machine. You can also clone an existing GitHub repository, which is what we're going to do. So I'm going to click on that clone existing Git repository, and now I'm going to go get that URL from GitHub to clone this down. So the URL is actually this URL up here at the top. You can also choose to just copy the clone with HTTPS URL here, which adds a little bit extra at the end, stylingapplications.git. So both of them will work. I'm going to copy this one up here. I'll paste that in here for you guys. And go back to Alpha Anywhere. Paste that in here. This is not a private repository, so you don't need to enter any more information at this point. It's a public repository. So once you've got the URL from GitHub, Alpha Anywhere will pull down all those files and clone them locally. And that's all it took. I now have that entire repository here. It's got a number of things in it, including a README file that are pulled down. But the core of what we're going to look at today are those web components that we made last time. The component that used a copied theme, one that used an inherited theme, and one that tweaked the alpha theme. And we're going to work largely from window demo today and look at our copied theme. So to recap, last week we made a sub-theme for the window. The window is a type of container that displays as like a pop-up window. And if you remember, we made this dark theme, this dark title bar theme, which is shown here, where we just changed the title bar to be white on black instead of gray on white. We also changed the close icon, which it does not render here in either window. Both of them don't display it, but I went to the team about why our icon was not turning white, and it turned out to be an issue. And so they've actually fixed that in the latest pre-release. So now when we look at our window that we've sub-themed, that icon now also displays correctly. So I am extremely excited about that. So this was the window we created, and that's their icon now. It's white. We never changed the fill on the hover mode to be white as well. It's still red. So we're going to go look at how to do that today. We're also going to look at how you change these buttons down here if you want them to be different colors, and to also talk a bit about the other types of properties that were in that sub-theme, such as the spacing. I'm going to close that. So this is our live demo. Let's go edit it in the style builder. And if you remember the style builder, it's going to open up on the code tab because this is where I was last time. But just to explain the layout again, this here that says this block of text, this is a preview of whatever the currently selected part of the theme is. Down here in the bottom is all the CSS for the style. If you're using an inherited theme, you will only see the CSS that extends the base theme that you've inherited from, as well as if you're adding a style tweak here, you'll only see your style tweak CSS here. You won't see all the CSS for the theme you're modifying. And then over on the adjust tab is where you can see a preview of everything that's in the style, from just the general settings like our icons, some of the basic sizing information, to grids, UX components, panel cards, list boxes, time pickers, date pickers, edit controls, buttons, lots of buttons, sliders, and scrollers, which are the expandable scrolling mechanisms on the list control. Excuse me. So that is where you can see everything that's been defined in here. On the code tab, you only work with a specific part. So we're going to work with window today. Oop. I thought I had turned off Skype. Apparently I did not. There we go. Don't read Sion's messages to me. So we had created this dark title bar, and I wanted to get the fill on these icons to be white instead of red. So we're going to do that first. And the easiest way to do that is to actually just take that title close button class we created that defined a fill of white for the unselected icon, the close image here, where we added it, and actually add it to both of these ones. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to, well, here, there's two ways you can find out these are where the icons live, but if you don't know that, you can actually click on the icon itself. And down here, you'll see this little sort of like breadcrumbs trail describing to you what you've clicked on and all the properties that are related to it. So for example, if you click on button, you see now we see outer wrapper, inner button class name, button default. So if I wanted to edit the button, I would go down here to edit class name by clicking on that. It highlights where you're at. And so I want to change these other two icons. So those are here in this close image hover, which when you click on this, highlights over here to show you where you need to go. So I'm going to change this first one by clicking this drop down button. And you know what? Yeah, I'm just going to add it directly here. I have to go to select. And then up here in the class, I'm going to type in that title close button class name, which this has that X circle still selected. If we scroll down in here, we should see it selected down here at the bottom. Now this preview isn't going to pick up this fill white over here because it doesn't really apply the class names in this state. It just shows you like the basic what the icons look like in case you want to directly change the fill or the stroke color here. But this is one place you can add the class. You can also add it directly here. But sometimes I get a little bit worried that I might mess up the formatting of that definition, so I like to go through this dialog. So I've added my class name. I'm going to click OK twice. And now that shows me icon button 24. Oh, I don't want 24. Let's see if we can get rid of that. Just delete that pixel property. And click OK. There we go. And then again, you can also type in directly. That will change the second one. So that's how we can, now that we've added that, the icon shall appear white at all times. I'm going to save that and we'll go back and just look at that in our preview over here. So now we mouse over, that's going to be white, which looks better. So let's take a look at the rest of what's in that window. So like I mentioned last time, we've done a lot of demos where we just like edit the button, which has extremely limited properties. It has a class name. It has a class name for when you hover over it, when you've clicked on it, and when it's disabled. And those are the only 4 properties for a button. But when you start to look at other objects like a window, you'll have things in it like location and direction, which tell you how to orient, how the title is oriented relative to the icons. I'm wondering if location is where the title bar is. So it can be at the bottom, it could be at the top. If it's blank, I believe it just defaults to top. There's a tool inset property, and I'm not entirely sure where this lives, what it affects. So let's make it something ridiculous to see what changed. Okay. It changes the inset of the closed icon. So if you have an icon up here, it moves it in. The vertical inset is the distance from the top or the bottom, depending on where it's positioned. So just to show you that, go with 50 pixels. That moves the tools down. You would possibly want to change these if you're wanting to add some sort of like padding or something that maybe the tools are a different size and you want them to align differently. In addition to the height of the title bar, you can change that here. You can also assign a class name. So I believe it's possible that instead of assigning that fill here, we could have changed the tools class just to generally apply the title close button color. And I'm actually going to go experiment with that to see if that is the case. So I'm going to temporarily delete these things and see if adding that class name would just generally change things. I don't think it does. It doesn't look like it does. So I'm going to undo that and put it back here. But if you wanted to apply something, I'm going to guess that maybe you could do like a background color. There we go. So that test class that I just made, it has a background color and it says display block on it. Might not need display block. It might just be block on its own. But any styling you want to do to this corner, you know that the typical like in Windows, it's a box up here, and I know on older versions of Windows sometimes that box is always red. So this would be a way you could apply a background fill to the close icon without changing the whole title bar. And then as for the rest of the parts down here, there's every window can have a header, it can have a footer, it can have a toolbar in the top or the bottom. The body section is the contents of the message. And then the button bar is where you would add your own custom buttons. So we had added that close button last time. And it's using this lovely aqua color that everybody adores. I can hear Dave laughing. No. But the reality is a lot of people don't like the aqua color. So in here, these button defaults are defined in this button defaults property, separate from the button settings for the rest of the style. Now, if you go in here and you find that class name button, which I'm going to do a search for, you could certainly come down here and say, you know what, the accent color for button is not like across the board. I don't like that. I want it to be gray or something. But if you wanted to define your window buttons a little bit differently from everything else, you would actually have to do it by editing the button default class information here. So let's see here, the black. There we go. Whoa, too many undos. So color is the font color. Background would be the background color. So I'm going to come back down here. And we're just going to add some new classes to change this up. And I'm going to apologize right now. A severe thunderstorm is about to roll through my hood, and it's really noisy outside, so it might get a little spotty here.
Now that should add some excitement, though, I think.
It's going to be so exciting. And also, you guys see this wigging out as you edit your CSS. If you do something wrong that has broken it, it will no longer render properly. So just so you know, that's one way to tell if you've done things correctly. So let's see, dark button. So I'm going to do a little Sass today, just to show you guys how Sass syntax can really be extremely beneficial to stuff that you do. So I'm going to start by creating this dark button class, and I'm going to say that the color of the text is going to be this same forced subtle color as we set for the title background. And I'm going to tell it that it has a border, 1 pixel solid for subtle. So nothing has changed yet because I haven't actually assigned this class name. So let's go do that now. We're going to add it to class name button. And the reason I'm adding it is because I want to keep the spacing that's been defined in the button class. And I only want to override a few of the settings, the color, and to give it a border. And I don't know why it doesn't have a border. So I'm going to cheat. Let's see if that will fix it. There we go. Important. I will do some investigation later to figure out why I didn't want to give it a border. So this is the base class has the button and the dark button properties assigned to it. Now, these other 3 class names are added to that base definition. So you could come in here and create separate class names for each one of these properties, but an easier way to deal with this without having to set all of these settings is to just define a nested rule using Sass. So I'm going to create 3 nested rules for each one of those states. So each one, if it's hover, it's been assigned a button hover. If it's been pressed, it's been assigned a button press class name. And if it's disabled, it's been given button disabled. So Sass lets you do rule nesting. So I can do something like button hover inside of these 2 curly braces down here, and define what I want to happen here to set up that background color to be something gray. So let's insert a variable. Let's go find a color. Let's use this for very light color from our variables list. There we go. Whoops. And I think that should just work, but it is not working. So I might have to cheat a lot today with important. Huh. Well, I'm going to switch it up a bit. And investigate why we're not getting that. Let's go back to our demo and open the Chrome Debugger and look at this. So this is our button. It's inside class window buttons, class button. And if I can minimize this a bit, you can see how it changes when I hover over, how this class property changes when I hover over it. So button hover was added. And when I press on it, unfortunately that goes away. Let's see if we can minimize that guy and bring it back. So that's hover, and that's pressed. And that's going to drive me crazy that it keeps disappearing on me. Oh, that's why it's outside. It's outside of alpha. All right, we'll go back in there. Scroll down here, find our close button. So when it's hovered, it adds button hover, which you can see right here on the side. And I have no good way to really keep this in view, so we'll do it that way. And then when I press on it, it adds button hover and button pressed to it. I move off of it, goes away. So I'm very convinced that that should have worked at this point, but it appears not to want to work.
It's the power of the live demo right there, I think.
It's the power of the live demo. And I've also managed to wonder if I can maximize this. I probably have to do it here. There we go. So that's not going to want to do what I want it to do. So let's just do this way. Button dark, button hover, and create a new rule this way. Make sure I leave that there. Light color. There we go. So that's hover. And just so you guys know, you don't really have to have a space. Well, no, the space is important. So if I put a space between each one of these, it's any parent button that has a child that has a dark button that has a button hover. If you remove the space, it has button and dark button and button hover class names all applied to it. So we're gonna make this for, we're gonna make one for button pressed, and we're gonna make another one for button disabled. So for button hover, we'll have this dark background color, and I'm gonna copy that and put it into pressed, and remove that, and insert a different color from our variables, the very light 4 color. And for the disabled, we just want to reverse things. We want the color to be white, and we want the background color to be this subtle color that we had defined for the text for a regular button. So those are the 4 different states. And if we save this and go back and re-preview our demo here, we'll see those changes. So this button didn't change because we did not change the base button style for the whole theme. But this is now, when we hover over it, it gets dark. When we click on it, it gets light. And when it closes, it closes. The disabled, we can easily test that by coming in here to our window, opening up the window properties, finding the window button section, opening up this property, and just checking the disabled option. And just as a side note, if you do turn on disabled, you have to use JavaScript to enable the button. There's no way to specify like a show hide expression here for these two properties. We'll save that. Go back to live preview. So now when we open it, that button should be black or extremely dark gray. And now when we click on it, nothing happens. When you mouse over it, none of those actions take place. So this I've defined separately for this particular window type to look different from anything else. So that's how you would change the buttons. I had mentioned before you could just create class names and assign them here. That's certainly a very valid approach. I'm curious to just quickly test this to see if maybe there's just a rendering issue on that nesting that I wanted to show you. So I'm going to do that by first deleting all this stuff and getting it into the structure that I wanted and saving it and just previewing it back in that component. So with nesting in Sass, you can create additional rules inside that will be merged basically with the top rule. So in addition to meeting this criteria, it'll also have to meet that criteria. Sass takes care of generating the CSS that the browser needs to understand for these rules as they've been defined. So you don't really have to do anything extra. Alpha generates that CSS and publishes it for you. And it does not appear, it appears not to work the way I thought it was going to work, which is a bummer. But fortunately, I can undo everything to get back to what we had. This toolbar itself, where the buttons are stored, is a little, it's different. It's
Someone just mentioned that you had the button still disabled. I don't know if that may have made a difference.
Yeah, I did, but I could tell when I went into it that it didn't apply anything because it had the exact same look as this button, dark button, and in that case, it was just overriding everything.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it was not picking up the white and the background color. So this is window buttons, this whole section right here. That's the outer wrapper. If you wanted to change this here, you would edit this window buttons button class name property here. It's the selector doesn't really pick that up for some reason, and I will ask about that. But if you wanted to change this background to make it look a little bit different, to make it look more like this gray down here, you could come in here and add a class name. There we go. Whoops. To do that. To add a background color there as well. And I asked about what is this, what was that, what is this color down here? And I found out that we have a variable for it that you can use called back VL shade or back L shade. It's either one of these two. So background very light shade color or background light shade color. Oops, I had lost the positioning there. All right. So we can add this here for window buttons, and that changes that background color now. So you may have noticed this button's not white anymore. That's because the base theme for a button, that base class button, doesn't have any background color. If we wanted to maintain that background color here, we'd have to add it to our dark button. So that shows up. So this is that section. The bottom bar and the footer are defined separately. Oops. If we go back and look at the window, I can explain where all these parts are coming from. So there's an optional window parts section. It's a top bar, a bottom bar, a header, and a footer. And you can turn these on as you need, as you want. They add different elements into the window itself. They're defined using HTML. You can also define an inline style here that will override whatever is in the style sheet. So I'm just gonna put in some text here for the HTML. Just to show you where all that appears right now and what we've set up. So that's our header and our top bar. This is our bottom bar and our footer. The bottom bar and the footer always appear after the buttons. And you can put any HTML you want in here. I believe there's also ways to embed controls in that section, either using JavaScript or some other methods available to you. If you didn't want to use these custom toolbar buttons and define your own buttons, the optional window parts is certainly a place you could add them. You can also just include the buttons in the window itself by adding them into the container. Oops, I did not want to do that. Exit without saving. Yes. Pardon my pre-release build. Back out of that, go back into it. You can also override the button bar inline style here as well. And each individual button has a little bit of stuff you can do with it. You can change its width. You can't override the button CSS here directly. You would have to go either into a style tweak to do that, or apply something to the inline style for the button bar itself to make those changes. There's also some settings down here to control behavior of the window, whether or not you can scroll it. So if the contents of the window exceed its size, scrolling would add the scroll bars to view it. If you don't want those to ever show up, you can turn that off. You can add some events for what happens if you pull down from the top and release it. That could trigger something. Maybe it refreshes the contents if you've decided to display content loaded from another page, or that is done using Ajax callback to fetch it before the window is shown. You can use these events to update that dynamically within the window. And then a few other things you can customize here. You can customize the pointer, which is this little thing down. Oh, sorry, it's the pointers. There are these things up here. They point to the object you've clicked on. So if the window, instead of popping it up at its location that we've chosen, you could come in here and turn on, I think it's either in here or in the action that displays it. You can turn on a pointer that points back to the object that opened it. So let's look at window position. I believe. Okay, so if we change it from in view or center or even absolute to relative, that we can specify that the window should open relative to the control that opened it. So in this case, self, the control you click to open the window. We'll click OK. And that, I believe, exposes this pointer icon property. And if you turn that on, it will automatically generate that pointer, point back to the control that clicked on it. Or you can specifically say you always want it pointing at the top, bottom, left, or right. I'm going to make those changes and preview it. So just to explain further what's happening there. So when you click on this, it displays a tiny arrow. That arrow here isn't really obvious with our new theme. It could be it might be better if it was the same color as the title bar here, or even larger. Maybe add a border around it. And so that is where you would just find those properties back in the pointer options for the window, such as making it bigger. Oh, size. I misread. Size is the offset from the edge of the corner here. But the definition itself, this is just pointer up. Let's go find pointer up to go just to look at how it's been defined. The pointer itself is actually created using border styles. So defining, there's this really cool trick you can do with CSS to, if you define different styles and sizes of borders, you can actually create triangles or circles. So we've created those pointers using borders, and also specifying their position relative to themselves to kind of give it that triangle shape and to minimize the gaps. So if I wanted to make these pointers larger, I could grab this. And I probably want to grab this one as well. Copy both the pointer up and the pointer up after properties. And just change these settings here. I'll keep the transparent. This appears to be important. I'm going to make all of these bigger. Being a live demo, I'm pretty sure I'm going to copy that background color to title dark, that this is not going to do what I think it does, but that's the fun of it all. Whoop. I'm going to leave the margin left and the top alone and make those exact same changes to width down here. Oh, because I'm leaving these alone, I'm just going to delete them. Pointer up dark after. And then down here, I'm going to add pointer up dark just to see what I get. That looks quite terrible. Interesting. So I've made some progress. I kind of understand what's going on here. It looks like these borders are starting from the center. So if you remember that top -11, I wonder if we do top negative like 20, if it will move it up even further. It does. So that moved it up. This must be providing some sort of mild border or tiny border. I don't know if you guys can tell on your screens, but it does look like there's a tiny gray border on all of this. And so it looks like this after command is just doing just that. Whoops. I don't think I want that. I think I want to go back to pointer up and grab the rest of these guys. So that's providing the fill. With a wider border, it's going to shift everything over. So I'm going to change the margin left from -10 to -20 so it aligns up there again. And I'm going to swap the color fills here. I'm going to take this property out and add it down here. So now that's a dark gray, really pale dark gray border on the edge with the dark fill of the subtle color. Let's save this and see if that gives me the look I want when I open this window now. So now that fits a bit better, right? It clearly is attached to this window. It's larger, so you can see better where it's positioned. I would probably fiddle around with this a little bit more to see if I can't push the window down a bit. So instead of being 10 pixels away here, maybe it's 20, just so it looks like it's pointing at the bottom edge of the button as opposed to the text. So this isn't bad. It's a good update given how much time we've spent on this. So with these themes, it's not just the classes assigned to a specific object. It's other settings. It's the size of a pointer. If I make that 20 now, it'll be further. Actually, that's probably the change I needed, is to change the size to 20. It's some of its specific settings. It's padding and spacing. Some of it is layout positioning, left to right, right to left. Icons, we can change those window icons here. If we don't want to use these X icons, we can just pick a different one and use a different close button. We could do, we could choose this style instead for the unselected version of our close button. I don't want 24. I need to go back in there and delete that from the size property. Everyone saw me select that one, but I'm not seeing the border, and I'm wondering why. So that was X circle border, and it's the stroke color. So it has a fill and a stroke. I remember last time we were trying to figure out why the X wouldn't be white, and it's because the fill was not white. So this also needs a stroke to be white. I'm going to go update my title close button class that we used to just say stroke. we've lost our icon. Let's go back in here and select it again. Icon button, title, close button. This guy. No fill. Or no size. Okay. Okay. There we go. All right. So now that's going to be a circle, and when you mouse over it, it will show that filled circle. So a window is pretty complex. You can get even more complex when you start working with grids and UX components, because you can define things such as the background fill for the data row. When you mouse over it or select it, the icons and the behaviors of the navigation, the form layout for detail view, and then the default icons for everything, as well as filtering and header information. Which it gets really long-winded into the icons, because there are a lot of icons in a grid, and the same in a UX. Oh no, not the same in UX. UX is a little more simpler, but this is where you go if you want to change repeating section classes here for your UX, as well as the classes apply to all labels across the board. The label is this text up here. When I click on text, it highlights it. I click here, it shows me where it's at. If I click on this section, it's actually input edit. This isn't available here, but repeating section row selected class name is. So that's where you find these things. And also, if you have copied the style, you can create different icon sets for the theme itself. So an icon set is the collection of icons that are part of the theme. We have our own icons that are all prefixed with alpha-icon- to try to avoid conflicting with any SVG icons you might include. But the sets themselves are defined in the themes folder. So if you've ever gone and looked inside the CSS folder for a specific theme, there is an icons folder, and it is just filled. Let me click all files. Oops. It's just filled with all those SVG icons. So you can come in here and add your own if you want to add additional ones. If you would prefer to use a completely different icon set that has a lot of the same names, you can just certainly make another folder called SVG icons maybe. And right now you can only create one of these, but they don't have to be SVG icons. They can be CSS font. It could also be just images that are in the folder. So there are really older themes. The GR Blue and GR Gray just used images and not SVG icons. So you can do that. You could take those images and have them used instead of those SVG icons. And those would apply to the full theme. And of course, once you did that, you would have to go in here and manually update all of these. Do you have any questions?
I don't see any questions.
Cool.
Yeah. That looks like it. We do have an Alpha Anywhere question, and it was about SharePoint and SharePoint Online 365. Do we have any documentation that shows us how we could connect Alpha Anywhere to something like that? And if not, we can certainly find the answer.
My gut feeling is no.
Okay.
But you can create custom SQL connection strings. to any data backend. And I think our example actually discusses SharePoint. I don't know why it came up with.
That's one of the examples, yeah.
It might just be a key.
Databases.
No, it's just
it's just there, right?
Yeah, it's just there.
Yeah. If you want to send us an email telling us a little bit more about what you're doing, you can send it to guides, GUIDES, @alphasoftware.com. We'd be happy to research that.
Did we add SharePoint? I think we added SharePoint. Let's go look at the connection strings dialog. So on the web projects control panel, if I go to tools, connection strings, new build, SharePoint is one of the options. It looks like it's built in.
Okay. What happens when you click build connection string?
It opens the create SQL connection string dialog, where you can provide your base URL, username, password, and specify the authentication that is used, including SharePoint Online, which requires a named resource. Named resources are defined in the projects. They are things like an OAuth provider. In the project properties, you would find named resource providers, and the resource providers part, expand that, and then create a new one by clicking new and giving it a name and selecting one of these options. And SharePoint Online is one of the options listed.
SharePoint Online API.
Yep, and this just defines how it just defines the credentials for how to connect to it, so that
so that you can use it in a connection string later on.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you use a connection string later on, or even a direct curl call if you want to do that. Or a script. Yeah, it just stores it in one place, so you only have to worry about editing it in one place.
Good. Hopefully that's helpful. But again, if not the full answer, just go ahead and email us. And I think that is it for questions. So if anyone has any other questions, you can send them to guides, GUIDES, @alphasoftware.com. Happy to get back to you. I believe Dan will be here next week, next Wednesday. And we'll pick up from there. Sarah, thank you very much for presenting today. Very much appreciated.
Welcome.
Thanks for those of you who asked questions and who attended and support us each week. Take care. See you next Wednesday, and goodbye.